Good morning to you all. I would very much like to have welcomed you to be at the centre in person for our event to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. But alas, we cannot be physically together. So let me give you a warm, albeit virtual welcome as we come together digitally to mark the day. I do welcome you all, but particularly our local civic leaders and very especially our survivors. Survivors, we miss you at the centre, but knowing that we are marking the day together should give you and us some comfort. Our time together this morning will be divided into two parts, beginning with our traditional memorial and then moving on to see how the Holocaust was not the end of racism, but how it still lives on in an important area of national life. Each year, the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust sets a theme for HMD. And this year, the theme is Be the Light in the Darkness. So while we remember the horrors of the Holocaust and of subsequent genocides, let us remember that the darkness of the Holocaust, that darkness like no other before it, gave way to the light of freedom, the light of hope, the light of reason, and the light of compassion. We at the Centre have been fortunate since its creation to have taken survivors into our hearts and helped them tell their stories so that all who have listened to their testimony have themselves become witnesses to what they experienced. They have been the light on the darkness of the Holocaust, in the knowledge that the light they have brought will continue to shine when they are no longer with us. Let us just take a moment to remind ourselves what this centre is and how it came into being. Beth Shalom, the House of Peace, opened its doors in 1995, founded by the wonderful Smith family, Stephen and James, supported throughout by their parents, Marina and Eddie, after a trip to the Holy Land in 1991, and created to shine a light in this corner of Nottinghamshire, a light that has spread throughout the country and abroad. And the family who have done so much to ensure that Holocaust education took its rightful place in the education of our young, and to ensure that the lessons of the Holocaust are not forgotten and consigned to history. They created a museum, a centre of education, and a memorial garden. But they also built a home from home for the survivors, an extended family for those who had lost so much. The Smiths are still an integral part of the centre, the only non-Jewish family in the world to have built a Holocaust centre, and we honour them as they deserve. As I've said, survivors have been at the heart of the centre from its beginning, but this year, unhappily, we have lost 9 of our survivors, and I want to say just a few words about each of them, as they were so important to them, and I know that the centre meant so much to them. I begin with Ruth David. Ruth graced us with her infectious laugh and intelligent conversation each time she visited. A Kindertransportee herself, Ruth lost her parents to the Nazi regime and became a teacher and fierce advocate of strong Holocaust education. Her passion for good Holocaust education was rewarded with the Cross of the Order of Merit, one of the highest honours in her country of birth, and something of which she was very proud. Ruth dedicated her life to making the future of younger generations better than her past. One of the ways in which her memory will live on is through our app version of The Journey, where her calm prologue and epilogue will grace the screens of primary school children for years to come. Dorothy Fleming, who I knew, in fact, before I ever had any contact with the centre. Dorothy and her sister Lisi were lucky enough to have travelled together on the Kindertransport and to be welcomed by the Hall family in Leeds, who did not want to separate them. Dorothy was crucial in pushing for the inception of our primary school exhibition, The Journey. And now hours of her testimony and her artifacts, including a beautiful piano cover from her childhood in Vienna, lie at the heart of the exhibition to be seen for years to come. Dorothy brought light to many through her career as a teacher and to her family, going on to marry and have children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Otto Jabukowicz survived Theresienstadt and was taken to Auschwitz. After lying about his age, he would survive to be transported to Sachsenhausen, where he would be a slave laborer until the end of the war. Otto would go on to gain a PhD and work in scientific research and development. He was a loving husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, and a truly remarkable man. Otto was a sought-after speaker who left a legacy behind him by sharing his story. From his suffering, he truly saw that hope for others was born. Gita Og. Gita's journey took her many places, including Lisbon, Gibraltar, and London, where eventually her family were able to escape Nazi persecution. Gita would settle in London and became an inspiration to many through her career as a teacher of modern languages and her regular appearances speaking at the centre. She too was a remarkable woman who worked hard to inspire others. In her words, Gita described her story as a tale of adventure and optimism, the simple and true story of an individual and a story of hope. Ellen Rawson, the smile. We welcomed Ellen Rawson at the opening of the centre and were blessed with her support and wisdom throughout. Ellen came to England on the Kindertransport and provided inspirational teaching to primary school children who were lucky enough to have heard her speak. Her cherished character, her love for playing bridge, and the friendship she shared with us is truly cherished. Ellen donated a number of artifacts to our museum collection, and the insight and support she gave to us will never be lost. Sue Pearson. Sue Pearson left Prague in June 1939 after her parents were able to secure a place for her on one of the Nicholas Winton transports. Sue would go on to deliver her testimony to thousands of children and made an impact on all of them as a true advocate for strong Holocaust education. She explained the need to appreciate diversity and difference and spoke openly and passionately, not only here, but in her beloved Sheffield, where she played an important part in civic life. Sue was a friend to us from the start, offering invaluable key counsel for the first concepts of our Journey exhibition. Her legacy will truly stay with us forever. Howard Kendall. As a child, Howard was able to leave Vienna and come to England on the Kindertransport, joining his brother Robert, who had already arrived. Howard remained in the UK for the rest of his life, eventually marrying and having children of his own. He was known to all at the centre for a number of years and had become a regular speaker to people of all ages. He was passionate about sharing his story as often as possible and talking in depth with students about many important contemporary messages that those who are lucky enough to have heard will remember forever. His commitment to improving the world in which we live by reminding us to care for one another is a crucial message. Not only will we miss Howard for this and for the work that he had done, but also his wicked sense of humour, the twinkle in his eye, and his keen love of football, especially of his beloved club, Nottingham Forest. Bernard Grunberg. Escaping on the Kindertransport, Bernard would ultimately lose his entire family in the Holocaust. He lived in England working as a dairy farmer and strived to share his story with as many people as possible. Bernard became an honorary citizen of the town of his birth, Lingen, in 1993, something we know meant a great deal to him. Bernard did always think of England and of all of us as Beth Shalom as his home, and we were proud to welcome him here. For him, among so many others, the centre was a home from home. His cheeky sense of humour was especially well known and will never be forgotten. Rudy Oppenheimer. With Rudy's passing, we said goodbye not only to a remarkable man, but also to the last of the Oppenheimer siblings. Rudy endured Bergen-Belsen concentration camp with his brother Paul and his sister Eve. The family worked tirelessly to try to make the future a better place, free of the atrocities they had lived. Each member of the Oppenheimer family was a true inspiration and guiding light in society. As a family as a whole, they proved to be rare and true shining examples of the good that can exist, even when escaping true darkness. Rudy spoke a total of 1,793 times, and with audiences of up to 200 people at a time, we know that he inspired over 100,000 school children. A staggering achievement and an unfathomable loss now he is no longer with us. Because fortunately, Rudy was filmed for the Forever Project, he will be able to answer our questions for generations to come. To quote Rudy, his testimony will forever be able to instill within us that standing by and doing nothing is not enough. We miss them all enormously for who they were and for what they did. And our memories of them and of their loss this year lead us to the memorial hall at the centre, where Rabbi Tanya Sakhnovitch, the rabbi of the Nottingham Liberal Synagogue, will lead us in our traditional memorial and candle lighting.
Thank you, Henry. It is actually breaking my heart to hear how many survivors we have lost this year, and particularly those who I knew personally. Let their memory be for a blessing. And now, I will be lighting 6 memorial candles in the memory of the 6 million of our people, adults and the children, the victims of the Holocaust. 6 million people who perished in the Holocaust. We pledge ourselves to stand up to racism whenever we encounter it, in the memory of those 6 million of our people. Let their memory be for a blessing. Zichronam livracha. Itgadal v'itkadash shmei Rabbah, b'alma divra chiroteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chai echon uvyom echon, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהיה שמי רבה מברך לעולם ועלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריהו. לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהיה שלום רב מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל בני אדם ואמרו, Amen. Through the current global pandemic, many more people can identify with the survivors of the Holocaust and other genocides. We are all survivors in some way since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. We have all been struggling at some point through the last year, either physically or emotionally or mentally. How lucky are we to be sheltering in our own homes rather than in hiding places or going through the horrors of the concentration camps as the Holocaust survivors did. The time of darkness has befallen us, and the long winter nights have symbolized the darkest hour of the pandemic. However, the days are growing longer and the nights are becoming shorter. The number of COVID infections is going down and the number of vaccinated people is going up. Slowly, we are approaching the light at the end of this COVID tunnel. The end of the darkness is near, but we are not there yet. So it is time for us to draw inspiration from our ancestors and Holocaust survivors, and to find the sources of light and joy within ourselves and the people around us. As the poet Amanda Gorman said at President Biden's inauguration, "For there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it." Let us become the light for ourselves and others while we're approaching the end of this COVID tunnel. And so we pray. Adonai, Eternal One, bless us with your presence of peace in our minds, of confidence in our hearts, and of light in our souls. Help us to become a blessing for each other and bring light to our fellow men and women who are struggling. Heal those in need of healing with refuah shlema. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema. The renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. And let us say Amen.
Rabbi Tanya, thank you so much for leading us in those prayers and for lighting the candles for us. Your words echo what I've been saying to my family, all of whom feel awful that we cannot come together with children, with grandchildren, being in lockdown in their houses, having to do home. Your message about how we have to put that into perspective when viewed against what those we are here to honor and to remember today went through is so important. So thank you so much for your prayers and your words.
Thank you, Henry. It's my honor. It's an honor for me.
We now move on to looking at anti-Semitism and racism in an important area of national life, football. The short film that we made last year for Holocaust Memorial Day was about footballers and football itself, to make our message about the importance of being an upstander. That film went viral and was seen by countless millions over the world. But today we pick up on football itself and racism and anti-Semitism in football. And we begin with our excellent director, Mark Cave, interviewing one of our survivors, Simon Winston, to hear from him of his own experiences. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Henry. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted that we're going to actually have a survivor with us on this live cast. So I'm really pleased that Simon is able to join us. Simon Winston BEM. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine at the moment.
Good. Well, I hope it stays that way. I'm sorry we're not actually together in the flesh, but you're closer to the soul of the place up in Nottingham than I am, so I'm slightly envious. Now, we are going to talk a little bit about football. We're going to touch on your story, but it will be wonderful. I, of course, and Henry, of course, and Tanya know your story, but just by way of background to kick things off, would you mind just telling us a little of your background?
I don't mind at all. It's really about me in another way too. So, with the help of my parents, I survived the Holocaust. The Holocaust, that's the brutal, calculated attempt by the Nazis to kill all the Jews in Europe. In 1941, the Nazis invaded our small town in Poland. 7,000 Jews were incarcerated in a ghetto. A ghetto means a makeshift concentration camp for Jews, where we were brutalized, starved to death, and murdered in mass graves. After 2 years, my family of 4 managed to escape. We were on the run and in hiding for a further 2 years. After the war, we had to linger for yet another 2 years in displaced persons camps, DP camps, in Poland and in Germany. We survived, but we lost our home, our dignity, and I lost my childhood. We were looking for a country that would give us sanctuary. In 1947, we were fortunate to be allowed to come to Britain to live. Eventually, we were accepted as equal citizens. I was overjoyed. I learned a new language. I went to a proper school. I played new games, and I made new friends.
Thank you. And I believe that you also, in this new start and new life, also found a new hobby.
Yes, one of my new friends introduced me to Nottingham Forest Football Club. He took me to my first match in the city ground. I loved it. I remember standing in the terraces. There were few seats at the time for spectators, amongst a crowd of about 30,000, and that was a lot considering we were only in the 3rd division. And we were. I remember there was a big noise every time Forest scored, not so loud when the opposition scored. There was no segregation of fans. Opposing spectators could stand wherever they want to. We would befriend our opposing fans, have a laugh with them. None of this violence and racism that you get today.
But things, I think, started to change, I would guess, around that time, didn't they?
Yes, gradually rivalry became fiercer. Forest hooliganism, football hooliganism, had crept in. There were fights, opposing supporters were fenced in, and there was the beginning of racist chanting. I suppose it was an attempt to put off opposing players, but it may have been something more sinister than that. At about that time, Nottingham Forest were having a great run. They'd recently won 2 European Cup matches in a row, and they produced the first black player to play for England, Viv Anderson. It's famously reported that Viv Anderson complained to his manager, Brian Clough, saying that he could hear racist chants at the matches and people were throwing bananas onto the pitch. Brian Clough reportedly said to him, "It's disgusting. They should be ashamed of themselves. But there's not much I can do about it. There's no law against it." And this from a man who famously punched a Forest supporter for running onto the pitch. But he said, "But don't let them upset you. You're bigger than that. And when they throw a banana, pick it up, peel it and eat it. Bananas are good for you. If you show them that you won't be intimidated. And if you can't do that, you're no good to me as a footballer." Actually, Brian Clough did a lot to try to curb racism in football.
Yeah, he did actually. I mean, God bless his soul. What a character. But of course, I do remember Simon. It was as a fan myself that it was a bad time to be a player of colour in football. But it wasn't just about anti-black racism in the game, was it?
No, it was about that time that anti-Semitism crept into football.
Yeah.
There was a team in London that supposedly had a large Jewish following, Tottenham Hotspur. Some board members were Jews, and they even had a Jewish manager. I remember the Yids chant every time Spurs came to the City ground, and nasty references to the Holocaust. It was only later I understood what the hissing sound was all about. In 1991, Nottingham Forest got to the final of the FA Cup at Wembley against Tottenham Hotspur of all. I remember it well. I parked my car, walked to the ground, over the bridge, sat in my designated seat. I was surrounded by Forest supporters, including some friends I recognised. The match went well. Forest scored the first goal through a Stuart Pearce free kick. And then Gary Lineker, I think it was Gary Lineker, scored to level the match. 5 minutes after the match should have ended, Des Walker, another Black Forest player who played for England, headed the ball into his own net. An unfortunate own goal. Suddenly boos started, but also the anti-Semitic chants, including that hissing noise. It came from the Nottingham Forest supporters, my friends. I heard one chant that sounded like, "Gas the Jews, they're no use." I wanted to punch someone. I wanted to complain, but I didn't. I was in denial. You see, when I first came to Britain, in spite of all the positives, there was racism here and no laws to prevent it. Name-calling and anti-Semitic jokes were prevalent. I had fights at school, in the army, even at college. In the end, I got fed up of fighting. I wanted to get on with my life, so I didn't tell people I was Jewish, unless it was absolutely necessary, for nearly 50 years. After that cup final, I should have waited until the next Forest match and brought up the matter with my supporter friends. I could have consulted the Forest management about it. I could have gone to my local MP and demanded that Parliament establish laws to prevent racial abuse in football. I could have been the light in the darkness, but I didn't, and I wasn't. I simply handed over my season ticket and have never been back to a Forest match since.
Well, Simon, I think you're very hard on yourself. And can I just say you are a light in the darkness, and not just today or this year, but for the many, many years that you've been telling your story. I mean, the story you've just told is very sad, and I can't imagine how hurtful it was after everything that you had been through. But as I say, you have gone on to be a prolific speaker about your life and your identity. And of course the Holocaust. So can I just ask you what changed?
Well, just over 20 years ago, I discovered Beth Shalom, the House of Peace that Henry was referring to. It's now the National Holocaust Centre and Museum. There I found out who I am, what my history is, and what advice I have to give is important. You have to tell people that abuse and unfair prejudice can lead to discrimination, that discrimination leads to hatred, that hatred is followed by violence and genocide. And you have to tell people that the Holocaust wasn't a joke you can laugh about at a football match. I've not been able to shut up since. Now I feel I may be the light in the darkness. I wish I could have been that light in 1991 after that FA Cup final match.
God bless you, Simon. I've made my comment on you. Thank you for telling us that story. But I thought, as you know, we wanted to bring Chris Hughton, the new manager of Nottingham Forest, onto the programme today, but he couldn't make it. But I was able to catch up with him yesterday. So let's just have a little listen to what he had to say about your story. Chris Hughton, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
No, you're very welcome.
So, you've had a long and distinguished career as a player, domestically and internationally, and now as a manager. You've experienced racism, I know, as a player, or you did. So the question I wanted to ask you is, how far do you think the game has progressed since you were playing? And if there has been any change, what's driven that?
Well, there is no doubt that there has been change. Some very good campaigns that have been involved in the game to eradicate racial abuse, and particularly, the biggest area would be, of course, what we would have experienced on the touchline and from sections of crowds. So that would probably be the most visual aspect, because that was something that was a weekly occurrence for myself and so many other players. Of course, what is allowed and what is not allowed, and even what we would have experienced on the football pitch. And credit to the game and to the FA, that's something that they have really clamped down on, and we have seen players being suspended, and we are seeing players being punished for that. The game overall is a more comfortable place for supporters to go and to not hear racist abuse on the touchline. But of course, what has come very much to the fore at the moment is social media. Very much an increase again in the type of abuse and abusive language that we would have heard very much in the past. But I think we are going through a period now where I think people are far more conscious about the things that they say, and of course I think the campaigns that are involved in the game, that have been involved in the game, have played a big part in that.
I think you quoted the Formula One driver, Karen Chandok. It's not enough to be non-racist, you've got to be actively anti-racist. For you, what's behind that statement?
I think probably it sort of stemmed from, and as I say, as you get older, you like to think that you get a bit more worldly, and I think probably it was more about everybody being more proactive than sort of reactive. Because what I'm seeing at the moment, and of course certainly regarding the Black Lives Matter campaign and what that has done to, I think, opens people's eyes in the game. And of course, then it becomes about racism and prejudices in the game. Not just about Black Lives Matter campaign, but generally what people and players are experiencing, people in the game, are experiencing. Mm. And what we are finding since then, and certainly over this last year, there are a lot of people speaking and answering questions, because it's been on the forefront of so many people's mind that probably haven't spoken about it before, but because of present times, they are asked the question. And even, if we are looking at employees, looking at their structures, what structure that they have in place that really encourages, a multicultural thinking.
Yes.
So I think it's more about, thinking about it as opposed to, just answering a question. And of course, the answers to the question is of yes, of course, we are not racist, and we don't think that way. And I think it's just about being more proactive.
Walking the talk, that makes sense to me. Lastly, really, I just wanted to be able to ask you, if I may, a question. A very dear friend of us at the Holocaust Museum, who's a Holocaust survivor called Simon Winston. He lives in the area, and he is a Nottingham Forest fan. I want to take you back to 1991, because that's the area of his question. He says he's been a fan of the Forest since the 1950s, when he made it over here from Poland. And his question for you, Chris, is this. At the 1991 Spurs-Forest Cup final at Wembley, I experienced anti-Semitic chanting. Chanting only started at the end of the match when Spurs scored the winning goal. It was the Forest supporters who were involved. As a Jew and a Forest supporter, what should or could I have done?
Yeah, no, firstly, Simon, I'm incredibly sorry for what you went through in that period or that particular time. And if we were in today, and certainly there would be procedures in place, I think certainly it would have been a case of notifying the nearest stewards to identify those that made their comments. I think it would be making it known, it would be writing to the club with your disgust of what you had heard. But I think probably at the time, those options weren't probably available. And the option that Simon took was to come away from that. And I don't think there would be anybody that could argue with that, because, that's very much how Simon felt. That's the emotion that he felt, and the disgust that he felt at that particular time, that he took the actions. And
Indeed.
I'm aware that I think that Simon got an award, I think, not so long ago. So So our congratulations, or my congratulations to him. And it would be a pleasure to meet him.
Ah, that's great. I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear that. One last question. Is there anyone that comes to mind? I'd love to ask you, given that this year's theme for Holocaust Memorial Day is Be a Light in the Darkness, are there any particular young leading lights?
Jordan Henderson, I think, has been very much at the forefront of what a lot of the captains have done as regards the taking of the knee. Raheem Sterling, of course, I think one. I think for particularly for somebody that has gone through the experience that he's gone through, with social media and the press, and so I think speaking the way that he has, and probably also Marcus Rashford. And Marcus Rashford maybe more so because it's non-football. To take on a campaign in the way that he has, and to use his standing in the game and his name to such effect, I think, has been outstanding. And this is somebody that I think that we could all look at and think, this lad is just a regular lad.
Well, listen, they are all three of them. They are great and inspiring role models, but so are you. It's very easy to get angry, and unfortunately, people don't always react well to that. But you put your point across with, decency and calm, and it's the very antithesis of all the kind of nastiness that goes on social media. So please keep up the good work, and I wish you all the best. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to that invitation.
Come to the museum. Yep, absolutely. Can't wait to have you over, and all the team.
Look forward to seeing you.
He was such a lovely guy, Simon. And we talked much longer afterwards as well about you, and he really would love to meet you. So you heard his invitation. Can he tempt you back to the City Ground after all these years?
Well, not at the moment, but who knows?
True. Hopefully in the summer, pose a vaccine.
By the way, he was a great footballer as well.
He was. He's a lovely man, and I think he'll do good things at the club. Simon, thank you very much for today. And now back to Henry.
Simon, let me add my thanks to Marks, not only for today, but for everything that you do for the centre. And may you be with us to do it for many, many years to come. And we want to thank Chris Hughton as well for giving us that really fascinating interview. My friends, we've come together today to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. And I want to thank you all for joining us. Next year, I hope and pray that we can be physically together. But in that time, during that time, each of us can be a light in the darkness and follow in the footsteps of all of our survivors, those who have passed and those that we're still lucky enough to have with us, taking their light forward to future generations. Each one of us has choices to make in our lives. And to show us how important making those choices are, we end with the film that we have made for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day, directed by Malcolm Green, with sincere thanks to the Genesis Philanthropy Group for their very generous support. So to you all, thank you again for joining us, and please, please be the lights in the darkness. Thank you.
On Holocaust Memorial Day, we remember
that we each have a choice
to indoctrinate
or educate,
to enslave
or liberate,
to persecute
or protect,
to spread fear
or share hope,
to suppress
or support,
to act with unspeakable cruelty
or incredible kindness,
to enable genocide
or inspire generosity,
to divide and segregate or unite and integrate, to stand back and look away
or stand up and look forward,
To kill.
or to save,
To hate.
or to love.
Holocaust Memorial Day.
January 27th.
Be the light.
In the darkness.